there remains the possibility that the president might head all of this off by resigning of his own accord. And I can hear you. I can see you giving me the hand on this. Oh, please, Maddow. As if this guy feels no shame. He would never resign something for the good of the country. He's incapable. I know. I hear you. The reason I continue to believe that it's a live prospect that the president will resign is not because it's good for the country and the president would do something good for the country. I believe it's a live issue because I think the president may conclude that it would be the best thing for him. I mean, go back to the article of impeachment again, right? What's the title of the article of impeachment? Incitement of insurrection. As many legal observers, including the justice reporter Charlie Savage of the New York Times today, have noted, incitement of insurrection is not a random collection of layman's terms. It's not just the title that they chose for this latest article of impeachment against President Trump. There is also a federal crime of the same name, included in Section 2383 of Title 18 of the U.S. Code, titled Rebellion or Insurrection. Quote, whoever incites, sets on foot, assists, or engages in any rebellion or insurrection against the authority of the U.S. or the laws thereof, or gives aid or comfort thereto, we love you, you're very special people. That person shall be fined under this title or imprisoned, not more than 10 years or both, and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. I mean, that's the reference in the article of impeachment. Incitement to insurrection, what they're referencing there is a federal crime for which there's a 10-year prison term attached and, handily, a lifetime ban on ever serving in federal office again. Now, the president is already facing near certain impeachment for a second time. We will see how he responds to that. But if he wants to avoid even the possibility of a federal lifetime ban on holding office and a potential 10-year prison sentence because of his role in inciting the Capitol violence, which is something, as a layman, I can say he plainly did. Whether a judge or a jury would conclude the same thing, I think a lot of prosecutors would believe that they would have a pretty good case. The only way that he can avoid the prospect of that, for sure, is to get a federal pardon that would preclude any such charge. CNN is reporting tonight that both the White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and recently departed Attorney General William Barr have both advised President Trump that he shouldn't try to self-pardon. He shouldn't try to issue a pardon to himself. It might backfire on him in the courts and actually make it more likely that he would face federal charges. But if he didn't want to test constitutional limits with potentially disastrous consequences, if instead he just wanted a different president to pardon him, well, he can't count on Joe Biden for that. If he were to resign from office now in exchange for Mike Pence pardoning him, well, that would work. That would preclude the possibility of him being federally charged. Again, we'll see.